What is going on, everybody? Happy Wednesday, midweek, back here at the studio, Traded Black Podcast. I'm your host, Shad Dales, back up a nice little 2-day trip at Chi-Town, Chicago. We'll give you all the ins and outs and some of the stuff that we heard this week in Chicago. You saw us live. Appreciate, obviously, everybody logging on Monday. Sorry about some of the technical difficulties. You live and you learn, but we'll get better at that. But we had some good thought leaders on the space. So lots to dive into. We heard some rumors. Yes, we did hear potentially Governor Abbott potentially vetoing SB3. So we'll talk a little bit about that with Michael Bronstein, who's actually going to come on in our second segment as well. We'll talk about some of the key things that we heard at Benzinga, which include banking. That was number one, hemp, rescheduling, all that stuff. So lots to get into. Let's welcome in AV here on a Wednesday. Good to see you. Great to see you in person earlier this week. How's things?
It's good. It's good. Yeah, Benzinga, I was thinking about it. It's like there really wasn't anything too like fresh or new or whatever as far as the information goes, but the human element is unmatched.
I know.
Being able to get in front of everybody, kind of see everyone and get conversations going in person is invaluable.
Yeah, it was nice.
Which is the main, as far as I'm concerned, it's the main value prop of the conference.
Well,
getting able to see all of the brass of the industry and new people that are in the fold. There were some major, I guess, mass market people there from brands that were looking at hemp, which was surprising to see.
Big crowd for all of our viewers. Like, you know, if there's any kind of information we can share with all of you, is that there was a big crowd there, a lot of representation, a lot of new faces, and a lot of suits, as Anthony Cogniglio hinted on Monday that we spoke with him. So I thought that was interesting. Go ahead.
Blazers.
Okay. Blazers. You got blazers?
Closet full of them.
Never wear them though, huh?
I wore one last Monday.
Yeah, you do once in a while. I will say that. But that's what COVID's done. It's just like buy a nice shirt and forget the blazers. But listen, we had a lot of great guests on, and there was actually one guest that we were hoping to have on Monday as well. But it's just a busy day for all of us. He had back-to-back schedules. But we talked to him after all of our podcasts were done. And we spoke to him and said, let's get you on Wednesday at 4 o'clock. And that's exactly what we're doing. So with that, let's welcome in our first guest, Terry Mendez, CEO of Safe Harbor Financial. How are you, sir? And good day.
I'm doing well. Excited after Benzinga.
Yeah, it was, you got obviously safe travels home. When'd you head home? Yesterday?
Last night.
Midnight. Yeah. So it's kind of one of those days that you're just slugging through, I think, everybody from the industry, because there was a lot of talking, a lot of energy. We might be a little bit brain dead here today, but that's cannabis for you. You can't sleep, no rest for the wicked. But, saying that, our audience is here, people that couldn't make it. What was the big takeaway for you while you were there? Because there was a lot of good panel discussions, some about banking, some about rescheduling, some about hemp. But what was the big takeaway for you, Terry?
For me, there was two main things for me. One is the interest in financial resiliency and actually, working with folks that help our cannabis-related businesses really reduce costs, lower the cost of production, cost per extracted gram. Folks looking for new ways to do that and new partners to do that with. So that was exciting. Talked a lot about that during those 2 days. Also, sat in and listened to the ongoings about AI and some of the folks that are, using AI as a strategy and using Bitcoin as a strategy as well.
What'd you learn off of that topic that kind of caught you by surprise or attention based off that topic?
Oh, it was interesting to see some of the cannabis retailers talking about accepting Bitcoin and accepting, Ethereum and other things like that. So it was, as a CEO of a bank, the question is, hey, where do you hold that and how do we regulate that and all that kind of stuff. Then you sit back and you look at the AI world and you say, how can they leverage the bots that exist today that have overcome things like robotic process automation and make this process more easy for folks, right? Right now, banking is a complicated area. It's not easy. And if I can use AI to make it easier, how can I make that investment and how can we start in that direction?
The stablecoin angle is interesting because stablecoins are coming. Most of them are Ethereum based. Privy was actually acquired by Stripe today, which seamlessly integrates payment rails using crypto. And they don't need to go through financial institutions to accept payment. So it's going to be a funny balance to see with cannabis operators accepting stablecoins when they can actually accept those easier than credit cards with the current framework that's in there. But Terry, you've been at the helm now for, I think, 6 months?
4 months. 4 months.
4 months. We've seen a series of press releases radically changing the business to a certain extent, focusing on some other areas. How would you, I guess, define your tenure thus far as CEO and where the business stands today?
We're moving fast every day. We're changing every day. We've replaced most of the management team. We've restructured the board of directors. We're looking at implementing a strategy I presented to the board as part of the interview process, which was you're sitting on a database of $25 billion, $26 billion of transactions. We know all of your customers. We know all your vendors. We know your employees. That's a wonderful place to data mine and bring new products out, but also a wonderful place to build a financial services hub out of that. And so can we create a situation, you saw the press release that we went out with Bennett Thrasher as a partner of ours. Today we have the financial capability of doing everything from bookkeeping at a lower cost of point of entry for single state and operators, everything from bookkeeping, APAR, collections, general ledger, into the fractional CFO, fractional controllership space, and really thinking about how do I create something where if I can get 4 or 5 operators on a platform, the cost of accessing talent comes straight down. Not everyone could hire $150,000 controller or $300,000 CFO, et cetera, et cetera. A lot of aids to cover that cost. But what if you share that cost amongst 5 or 10 different operators and you have a one-to-many similar to, let's call it public accountancy back when I was doing that 15 years ago.
Yeah, it's funny you mention that because we've seen, not to name names, but we've seen a series of press releases with C-suite executives leaving the cannabis space with certain operators, that whether it's not the CFOs, is obviously that's an integral position that's much needed within the C-suite, but chief people officer, commercial officer, several different roles to cut costs and lean out those margins. Do you see your services going into the HR realms as well within those businesses?
100%. So I'm looking at this as business process outsourcing for cannabis with really high level expertise, onshore and offshore expertise that we can deliver and merge together to create this type of hybrid solution where you should not, if you're a grower and you happen to have a license and you know how to grow, and you shouldn't have to become an IT expert, a finance expert, an HR expert to run your business. Let's figure out if your business works for your business strategy works first before you hire these folks and then have to figure out how to position them later on.
Well, we learned on Monday that Jesse Channon was actually mentioning this to us, Anthony, where it's just less on innovation right now, more about operational efficiency, saying that, what do you think are the top 1 to 2 concerns that companies have when they're approaching you right now that you're hearing more often than not?
Well, the first thing I heard all throughout Benzinga is I need a loan. And so everybody's looking for financing. One of the things we're doing here at Safe Harbor is we're creating what I'll call like the lending tree of cannabis, where you can come to one place and then we'll go out and find the financing for you. It's still in development, but that's something that we're working through. The second thing is a partner. People that can come onto their boards or their financial advisor, or a partner that can help them to see where they're not seeing. I got involved here at Safe Harbor because Sandeep approached me, the founder. She's so well known. She approached me and said, I need a strategy and I'm not seeing what I don't see. So can you come in and look and see, and discuss a new strategy for this organization? I want to do that for all of our clients. I've been in the business transformation world since 2006. And, it's just not a talent that everybody has to be able to look at something and say, have you considered these other 5 ways to solve the problem?
Well, I'd be curious. Go ahead, Anthony.
I was going to say, is there a certain business size where you find your sweet spot, whether it's small, medium to enterprise level and the larger MSOs, or kind of take it in stride on a case-by-case basis and just assess a client's best needs regardless of business size as to how you can come in and optimize their processes?
So I think there's a misperception out there. I remember the first time I took a job with a Fortune 500 company, Arrow Electronics, thinking that, man, they're going to have their place buttoned up. And I would say it was hundreds of small entrepreneurial businesses versus one giant business, and not one of them were buttoned up the way I had expected. And I think that's the way the larger companies are as well. It's a number of smaller businesses that you acquired over time with interesting legal structures, and each one of them having their purpose And the question is, the purpose today the same as the purpose when you first created that? And can we change that up? And changing that up, does that create opportunity for you?
Right.
Whether that opportunity is catching revenues or reducing costs. Either way, you're just opening new avenues, like getting into the hemp business or getting into a business you didn't previously think about. So I don't really think it's about the size of the business. It's really about, if you're already in this situation, how do we help you navigate through that situation? And before you get into a challenge, have some partners available that can ask some questions on, that say, hey, and I think that's unexpected from a bank CEO. Not every bank CEO has been an operator of a multi-state operator, or a single state operator, and have lived the every day of cultivating, every day of extracting and edibles development, et cetera, new product research. So we bring something to the table today that I don't think we had even a couple of months ago.
And then on the lending front, are you seeing lenders still freely extending capital to cannabis companies? Are you starting to see them, I guess, get a higher coupon to as there's more implied risk with these businesses, or anything nuanced in the underwriting process that you're seeing that's changed over the last couple of quarters?
I would say it's very, very hard today to get something issued just on the value of your license or the perceived value of your license. The same thing for construction loans. They're harder and harder to come by, the construction loan side. The risk premiums that they're asking for is much higher. If you have commercial real estate, we can look at it from a commercial real estate perspective. You can get something like a 60%, 65% loan to value ratio at a reasonable interest rate in the low double digits, high single digits rate. But outside of someone that has that commercial real estate, it's been tough. And so, especially when your risk-free rate's sitting at 4%, you can invest in no risk businesses and still make, single digits and low double digits, depending on which environment.
Makes sense.
You mentioned strategies. Now, is this stuff that you're coming up with based on clients' concerns right now? Is it stuff that they're not thinking of? Like, what's the best approach? And is there any examples, without naming any specific company names, that you could share with us that kind of gives people just a better idea as to what a lot of companies are facing right now based on the current economic conditions?
Well, I just look at the portfolio of clients that we have, and it's an unfortunate percentage of our existing clients. Just in the last month, I believe there were 10 of them to close their accounts because they went out of business.
Wow.
I would love to be in front of that. Before you're in the situation where you're closing out because you went out of business, give us a call, right? Let's have a conversation about what your other options are. Because those companies wind up in receivership, they wind up getting into situations where, a couple of different solutions before you get there. So, for example, I took over at Nature's Medicine a couple of years ago, and when I took over, they were, growing rapidly in multiple states, but using cash faster than they were creating cash. And as a result of that, they were going to have a cash crunch on the horizon. And we took many steps to fix that, from investing in better dispensaries to reinvigorating certain brands, to closing operations that weren't supporting the success of the business anymore. And when you're an owner, that's the hardest thing for you to do, because you built it. You don't want to close it, and then you wait for the very last second to close it. And that last second, you lost the opportunity to create some value out of that asset.
Yeah. I think there's a misconception at times where if you see certain companies with large footprints in specific states, you think that they're, vowed to basically win within that state. But it's very crucial, obviously, on locations. And we often hear that as well. But, a lot going on, I would say, this week. But cash flow, obviously, is an important issue for a lot of companies right now in debt. So based on conversations that pertain to that, again, what was some of the dialogue that you received, and how do you address, I guess, those concerns?
Yeah, the first thing I tell folks, let me see your 13-week cash flow. Let me see what you're specifically doing to manage that day in and day out, and what challenges you have and pressures. Look, we're in an environment where the options for unsecured creditors is to pursue involuntary receivership or some version of receivership. They know that, we know that. We can have very, very difficult conversations, but transparent conversations with them to say, this is our situation. this is when I'm going to get you paid. And this is where you are on my 13-week cash flow projection, and be honest with folks. The more transparent and honest with folks are, the more they're willing to work with you through a challenge. And so, whether that is the cannabis industry or, I cut my teeth in the aerospace and defense industry when they were having some challenges in the 90s. It was the same conversation. Look, we're going to get you paid, but you might not get paid for 18 months. But you're on the schedule, and this is when you're going to get paid.
Good point.
That was one. The fact that you brought that up is interesting, because that is one thing I did hear from several people at Benzinga is we're being very select from an MSO perspective. We're being very selective now with who we do business with, because certain vendors and certain companies get to a certain threshold in their accounts receivable to where they have to make a business decision to be like, I can't sell anymore to this party because it's now becoming a balance sheet risk, and their company might be a going concern. Do you think that we start to see that as an increasingly popular trend within the space, that they really just buckle down on financial discipline to that degree?
I think you have to where we are. So yes, yeah, absolutely. And I think I just talked to somebody yesterday, social equity license holder, and he was building a cultivation. And one of the things I shared with him is, a strategy. I say, go out there and find some firm fixed price agreements similar to an oil and gas agreement for your fixed costs, to make sure your fixed costs are covered. Then you can go and sell wholesale on the spec market. You never want to be trying to figure out how to cover your fixed nut. So if you every year figure out how to cure volatility for the dispensary holder, right? And then for those dispensaries, sometimes you win, sometimes you don't. But then you go out and spec and you win on the portion that you go out in the spec market for. Cultivation's tough, because whether you're a cultivation or extraction facility, when you're standalone, you're competing for shelf space. And if you don't own a dispensary, you're getting pushed, especially extraction facilities. You're getting pushed at the dispensary level, and at the cultivation level, you don't own your inputs. So your inputs and your outputs are both pushing you to natural destruction. So we have to manage that carefully.
Yeah. 26 million in transactions, you were saying earlier. What is, I guess, what's the future, I guess, look like for like biggest opportunities that you're seeing in the industry that pertains, I guess, to your business over the back half of 2025 moving forward?
Yeah, for me, it's getting people aware that Safe Harbor is still in the game. We were the first, but we're not usually the first person people think about in terms of banking. And so awareness is a big deal here. I've hired a great senior vice president of marketing who's changing that for us, and we're going to come out with some solutions. But also it goes beyond banking. For me, it's about how do I help? I have no control about how much deposits somebody has in their bank account.
Yeah.
But we get paid by the financial institutions who are our customers, and the cannabis companies are our clients. We get paid by our customers based on deposits. How do I help people grow their deposits? Well, the only way I can really help people grow their deposits is to get involved with them at a natural level and basically help them through their challenges.
Yeah.
Right? And so every step of the way, we're negotiating solutions. And so I'm thinking of this as the McKinsey of cannabis. Effectively, not only do I want to give you a great payroll provider like one of our clients, Work, and we signed an agreement with Works, but I want to do the implementation services, and then I want to manage it, and I don't want you to ever think about payroll again, right? And the only thing you should hear from us is payroll got paid, and by the way, you might have too many people compared to your competitors in a particular state, in a particular dispensary, as we build some data intelligence into our processes.
True business optimization up and down the value chain for the managed clients.
Last thing I'll bring up, and everybody's favorite topic, is reform. In the event rescheduling were to take place, like how would that benefit you? Or would it?
Well, it would benefit us. Anything that creates depository base for the cannabis industry and our clients benefits us. It is going to be years before, there are many, many legal industries that JP Morgan, Wells Fargo, and some of the major banks still don't touch today. I own a travel business on another thing that I do, and I couldn't get an account with JP Morgan Chase because they were concerned with anti-money laundering, and that's a large industry.
Of course.
Right? And so if you think about that, you're not going to see the large banks jump into this industry anytime soon. What you will see is an opening up of investor capability, new lines of new capital coming into the market. And that new capital in the market gets deposited in our accounts, and we make money on those accounts as we grow that deposit base, right? And as those people have that new capital, financial services then ramp because that new capital is deployed on new strategies, and those new strategies need to be deployed efficiently. I think gone are the days of the lack of judicious use of capital, right?
Yeah.
People are now being very, very careful on how they use that capital. And if I can give them solutions that are lower, if I can build it for you and you can rent it for a price that's lower than what you can build it as yourself for, then why not?
Yeah. People want to reach out to you. Where can they find you?
Oh, goodness gracious. So we're at shffinancial.org. And again, my email is easy, terry.mendez@shffinancial.org. So love to hear from people and see what we can help them with.
Before I let you go, you do a side gig on travel. Where's the number one destination on the bucket list that people should go to this summer? Can you share some insight pertaining to that? What do you think?
For this summer, gosh, we do a lot of trips to the Caribbean, but lately we've been seeing a lot of folks going to tours in Europe, Rome and Italy, and
I bet.
Paris. So nothing crazy, but travel never really took the hit. And once COVID kind of opened up the world, it bounced back really quick.
Especially in Europe. I'm heading to Germany. Have you been to Berlin? Next week I'm going there. Have you been?
I've been to Berlin, Frankfurt, and Dusseldorf, and they have a World League of American Football teams back in the 90s, and so I used to do the audit for the NFL, and they would send me to Europe to tour Europe and do audits of these American football teams. So it was one of the best times. Early 20s, man. The stories are endless.
Oh man, we got to have a conversation with you again about that. But yeah, that's interesting. Always some interesting stories that you hear about people that get involved in this industry and what they did before. But more importantly, appreciate the intake and the insight that you found in the last couple of days at Benzinga that pertain obviously to a lot of companies, especially banking, what their current situations are, the challenges that they're facing. But all in all, I thought it was a great show, and it was great to see people like yourself. So let's keep in touch, okay?
Sounds good. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Barry. A lot of changes that he's made, but smart guy to say the least. But interesting angle with crypto, AI, getting involved. You said stable coins. That's interesting. And I think if you were to sum it up, simplify it for people that are trying to make sense of the two industries and how it could impact cannabis, how would you best describe that, Anthony?
How would crypto impact cannabis?
Yeah.
It's way too early to tell.
Yeah.
Right now, I mean, as far as companies accepting crypto as payments, I'm sure with the legitimacy of crypto, especially with things like the Genius Act, I mean, you're going to see stable coins and those payment rails probably then also fall under the AML laws. So if there's no rescheduling or no safe banking or no reform in the cannabis space, while crypto moves forward, cannabis will still stay in cement blocks that we're in currently.
Yeah. Big crypto on cannabis market, writes Emilio. Tie grower, he says, Shad, Google the food. You want to tell me why, tie grower? It's going to happen, he says.
It's a surprise.
I guess it's a surprise. Google the food. All right, that wraps up segment one, which is our special guest here today, which was Terry Mendez, CEO of Safe Harbor Financial. It's now on to segment number two, Insider's Edge, here on a Wednesday. Let's go. Back here on a Wednesday, see a Google the food. I see a big smile. You're laughing. I don't know what that's all about, but
just Google the food.
Google the food. Google the food.
Google the food.
This is Insider's Edge, and presented by the American Trade Association for Cannabis and Hemp. And let's welcome in their president, Michael Bronstein, here on a Wednesday. Back to the show. Good to see you, sir. How are things?
Gentlemen, good to see you.
Yes, I know when we were on with Terry, I saw you in the background on the phone trying to get as much information as possible regarding a few things that you and Anthony were talking about prior to going live. But look, it's been 9 days since we last spoke to you, and I know the Senate in PA was having some hearings, and we know that adult use was going to be towards the top, if not the top, one of the top things to address within the Senate. Any update on what we've seen since we've last spoken? Any insight that you could share?
Yeah, I think what everybody is waiting on is the dropping of Senator Laughlin and Senator Street's language, as well as the Kincaid major language in the House.
Okay.
And we do think that that is imminent. And that's the big thing that we're watching for in terms of when that language drops, what the reaction to that language is, and also if we see additional movement or discussion around it. I think that the thing that we're kind of also watching for is, does it change the discussion around the Republican Senate relative to adult use cannabis legalization? Is it a turn the page moment? Because the Senate, as you recall, when we last had a hearing, HB 1200, which was a bill that was dead on arrival because it had state stores in it, was essentially burned on the Senate side during a hearing, saying, hey, like really a lot of senators said, look, we really just want to see, Laughlin Street, right? And that bill. So when that bill, the language drops, I think that's going to start an important discussion over on the Senate side that needs to happen. It does feel like that the budget could be done on time, but it's also feeling like there's a lot up in the air on some of the political conversations, not really just cannabis, but there have been bills that have moved around. We haven't really seen some of the level of activity. I think that we need to get a budget done by that time, but there is time to be able to do it. It just means that there'd be extra session days that they might go to. It's not uncommon for Pennsylvania to move into a couple weeks into July or something like that.
So don't read too much into a number of things up in the air right now and what that could or could mean or detrimental to adult use. Like, how should you, I guess, perceive or take that?
I think the budget process is very open right now in terms of what could be included in it. It's how folks react to when language drops, things start moving around, right? Do we see movement of another vehicle? All of those types of things. Those are the things that we are looking out for on our end, right? Is something going to move quickly? And the sense of the chambers they are waiting to review the language that is going to be dropped, right? And folks are, I think, waiting on bated breath to see where it is. And I will just say this. I think that the folks were not, in my view, I think that we're kind of past from the analysis, the policy discussions, a lot of the policy discussions. Yeah. I actually think we're sort of in a political discussion right now.
So does that bode, if we do get, let's say, the street and Laughlin language, does that bode well for this bill moving, I don't want to say expeditiously, but sooner than expected, as their language was widely accepted when it was initially introduced before we got to this process?
It's how people react to it. Okay. Right. Because we'll see, we'll watch very closely with what other Republicans in the Senate who said that they wanted to see the language, how they would react. And I think that we'll also see both from, the governor's level who has called for it, as well as the, as well as the House, which sent a vehicle over that it was expecting to be amended. Right. That's the conversation. And they said that. I mean, if they said that in public, they've said, well, if you believe something, you should send it back to us with something different. So those are the things, those are the things right now that, are being, that are being weighed.
Okay.
Jamie Campbell writes, PA has a $500 million shortfall. Keep that in mind, right? Is that accurate?
Well, the shortfall, it depends on the number. I mean, the shortfall could be higher. And the more that the shortfall is, and it has a lot to do with how the calculations are being made right now in terms of what each side is demanding in the budget. So if somebody's saying, okay, well, we've got to regulate gaming in a way that's going to bring in revenue, and, we're going to need funding for transport, the numbers, I think, on some of those things don't necessarily match. So how do you get a number that matches? Well, you get more revenue sources for it.
Yeah.
And this is a revenue source. There's a lot of bad ideas on the table that nobody wants to do for sources of revenue. That would include like, all right, well, do we raise taxes? No one wants to raise taxes.
No.
Right? Do we cut? Well, there's been a lot of cuts that have been done and things are coming down the pike. I don't think there's the votes for that. Right. So, and House Democrats aren't going to do that. And the governor certainly doesn't, I mean, there's no desire for that. So it's like, all right, there's a lot of pressure that's building up around this budget. Where do we reach to find that revenue?
Right. Okay. Right. Well,
it's $1 million question, and we better hope it's cannabis.
Only a couple. I mean, there are only a couple of places. There's two things. There's really only a couple of things that if you're going to do big things in the budget, there are only a couple of ways to do it. And it's gaming and it's cannabis. And I think that of the folks who are supporting this, there's a lot of agreement around what the policy should look like. It's the politics of it. Okay.
Yeah. What kind of revenue are we talking for gaming potentially? Do we know?
It depends on how they actually do it and what they agree on a tax rate. If they take sort of an Illinois model approach with the way they define it, they'd be talking about something on the order of $80 to $100 million a month that would be being brought in a month, that they would be brought in on that. Okay. If they don't do it that way and they have a lower tax rate, the number is different. So it's kind of like what tax rate do they land on? And the numbers that they've had are substantially lower than what, a state like Illinois, which is, which regulated has. So, folks are going to argue about, as they're arguing about cannabis, what's that number? What's this number?
Right.
Got it.
So when you look at Governor Shapiro and some of his dollars, as far as, everything he's put into the budget, is that including both gaming and cannabis, those numbers, or is that just one of them? Like I
think it's both, right? But it's like, okay, can you, like Harrisburg is pretty good at sometimes being like, all right, it's $500 million and we just did 350 million. All right, we're going to leave town. Go find the, we'll see you later. Right. That happens sometimes. Like, yeah, all right, the numbers don't match. I guess it's surprising to you that the numbers wouldn't match in a,
well, where I'm going
probably never match.
Where I'm going with this, I didn't realize the size of revenue that gaming could potentially be. Like, is there any concerns at all that it could pass just gaming and not cannabis? Like, is that a real threat?
I think that everything is open on the table.
Yeah.
Right. On this. I don't think one's a threat to the other, because here's why.
Well, this is where I'm saying with a lot of members in the Senate, we still have this generational thing and how they view cannabis.
Yeah, but I mean, the Senate has expressed a desire to regulate gaming, and the House has expressed a desire for marijuana, right? So, sometimes you have something that somebody wants and something somebody else wants, and they make a good trade. And I don't think that I don't think that marijuana legalization necessarily happens on its own. I don't think anything happens on its own.
I think it's fair.
You're not going to get a straight up vote, at least right now, as of today, in the Republican Senate caucus on this. And I've said this for quite some time. It's what do we give? What do we get? That's the nature of the budget.
Michael, how much do neighboring states have impact on decisions and the amount of tax revenue that's being generated?
They have a lot of impact now because every state except West Virginia. So over 90% of Pennsylvania's border is covered by an adult use state. Yeah. So so it's very hard. And this happens all the time in Pennsylvania. Everybody else does something first. Well, the other states are doing it, right? We've got to jump in. Pennsylvania has to jump in and do it. So that pressure is real on this. And it also substantially changes the argument, because it's hard for people to say, okay, like we can't do this, or we shouldn't do it, or it hasn't been tried before. Pennsylvania is a middle of the road state.
It's one of the most drawn out questions in this industry is when will PA actually go live with adult use? It's been around, Anthony, for what, 4 years, 5 years? Like when did medical go live?
PA, yeah. Go ahead, Michael. PA's been an issue for like, say 3 years, three years, probably.
At least 3. But I think it was that a lot of people were optimistic based on who the players were in the space that had footprints within the state. And they saw obviously the success that the medical market was starting to produce. But
this is serious discussion as there's been in Pennsylvania on legalization. So it's like you get up to the line, right? You get as far up as you can to the line. And the way that it's going to work is we're far up to the line. When are we going to cross that? When are we going to cross that threshold? Because now it's not going backwards, right?
No.
The only thing that could change going backwards is if an election happens or somebody changes, right? That's the thing. But right now we're set on, the politics, I think, are set to be able to have this. I mean, that's why a discussion is happening right now. That's why we've seen movement.
I do want to get into Texas, but before we do that, I know we were busy in Chicago earlier this week, but Mike Tyson was at a DEA's office in New York earlier this week. Did you get a chance to see any of that? You didn't?
No, I didn't see Iron.
So for those that know, Mike was up there with Alina Habba. They were talking about fentanyl. Jason and Ziad were both present. After you actually review the picture, you can see both of them right behind Mike. But no, it was a fruitful conversation from what I've heard. They talked everything from fentanyl to illegal Chinese cannabis operations in certain states. Rescheduling was not spoken about, from my understanding. But Mike Tyson owns a cannabis brand, and he's sitting in the DEA office with a DEA jacket on. You can kind of read between the lines. If it's not, and then he was at the UFC event with Trump 4 days prior. So not saying anything is happening, but again, the writing's kind of on the wall with where that could go, not necessarily where it's going to go. But like I said earlier, and you probably agree with me here, Mike, nothing's happening until Terry Cole is confirmed as far as movement. Like everybody can look at the calendar, stare at the calendar, pray to whatever God you pray to that Terry Cole is going to finally get confirmed and come through. I'm pretty sure Biden's nominees took an average of 100 days to get confirmed once put on the calendar. Terry Cole was put there 2 weeks ago. There's going to be some time that's going to elapse unless things expeditiously move forward that he gets into office, but nothing is moving to the better or worse until he's sitting in that chair at the DEA.
That is right. That's what it's going to take. You're going to have him sitting in the chair, and that the conversation, I think, changes once that happens.
Yeah. And did you see the headline last night of the panel that is suggesting to the Solicitor General at HHS to review the process in rescheduling, which was kind of laughable at best because that's a Trump appointee that they're asking to go after it. Trump's already said that he's for. Granted, don't beat me down in the comments because he said this on the campaign trail, hasn't said it since, but he said he was for rescheduling, for medical marijuana, and they want a Trump appointee to review the Biden process that the OLC has already reiterated and said was legit, to go back to the process that put cannabis in Schedule 1 in the first place. It seems like Sam theatrics, that they just have a couple of good buddies in Washington that are willing to entertain these notions and request these things when really they're not going to get any sort of resonance within what's going on, and they'll stop there at a simple request.
Yeah, I mean, you have the OLC did what it was going to do, and albeit it was under the under the Biden administration.
Yeah.
But you also have an ALJ process that is paused, but it's still ongoing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's like, it's not a, I think that there is a, to me that's where all of that sits. I don't read too much, I don't read too much into that. If you're Sam and on the other side of this, you're trying to say, review this, review that, right? That has been their complaint.
Yeah.
But when you actually look at it, the scientific evidence that was put forward and what they did was really, really thorough.
Correct.
It was really
very thorough.
It was really thorough. It was like, okay, we actually have the evidence here. Mm-hmm. And that's what made it so not surprising to us, but I would say so meaningful, because again, it was the first time that the federal government, historic, monumental, said what we all know, which is that, cannabis can be used as medicine.
Yep.
That it has medical properties, that there are conditions for which it can be used. And by the way, it's not as harmful as where else things are scheduled with it. And that was a historic moment. We will look back at that moment and say, okay, there was a before and an after to it.
Yeah.
I think it was a turning point, even though it's been drawn out, but it has been a turning point for the industry. Because
reading the actual document was the most transformational part of it, because once that FOIA request was granted by Zorn and Shane, the damn document was like everything that we could have potentially wanted it to say. It said. It wasn't like, hey, we looked at cannabis, it does X, Y, and Z. Let's entertain rescheduling. It was, like Michael said, it was thorough. It was very thorough.
Someone said,
I revisit. Do you know how much you like? How problematic it would be to revisit a document like that? Like, I mean, sure, you could. There are a lot of things that you could do if you were trying to do it, but revisiting that, it's hard to unread it's hard to unsee what was already written.
Michael, we learned in an interview on Monday that the difference between the European market and cannabis versus the American market is that it's belief versus data, where in Europe it's more based on data, and in the US it's more based on belief. Do you agree with that?
I mean, that's Europe in general. I lived in Britain for, I don't know, a couple of years. I used to work in the House of Commons.
Yep.
And I worked for the British Labour Party during Tony Blair's last re-election campaign. Spent a lot of time, talking through European politics. And I remember on the legalization issue, which wasn't as developed at the time when I was there, how the different countries were kind of talking about it and how they were breaking down on it. And there is a difference there with how they treat that data. But also remember that the culture too in the United States is conviction around a certain thing. And one of the entrepreneurial things that Europe has lagged in sometimes is the entrepreneurial spirit of getting behind a big idea.
Yeah, good point.
Right. And so to me, I think that those things are different. And I also think that it's like more, they may get to the same answer at some point. But the bureaucracy that exists around it is different.
Yeah.
With how they treat these things.
Tough to compare the two, 100%. And I agree with everything you're saying there. Turning point we talked about with the HHS. I also heard, and this is from a couple of people, I don't know if there's truth to this or not, but did hear a rumor this week in Chicago that Governor Greg Abbott would veto the bill. And I don't know if that will happen or not. But in the event that he were to veto this SB3 bill, what would then happen, I guess, after that? Like, do you think they can't really remain the status quo, I would think, but what are you seeing and hearing pertaining to Texas? And do you think there's any truth to some of the stuff I just outlined?
So Texas, the governor yesterday, I think that anything that you're hearing out of Texas is conjecture on what people know will do, because the governor has said himself that he doesn't know what he's going to do. And as recently as yesterday, I think that he had some very telling comments where he was going to sit down and review what's been put out in front of him. And he even said that he was going to put on his judicial hat as he was looking at this. And so I think that he hasn't made a decision. He's looking and he's weighing the arguments. Okay. And I think that there isn't just a judicial decision here. There's also a political decision.
100%.
That's on this, just in the way sometimes Supreme Court justices get to where they need to be on the back end of this. To my view, from the political process, you look at it. And you know what was else that was interesting? Actually, he talked about, and so throughout this whole process, folks have wondered what the relationship is with the lieutenant governor, because it's really strained, or we've heard that it's really strained, right? So there's sort of the commentary that, well, okay, because those two don't get along, that's why there would be a veto coming, right? Well, it was interesting because the governor made it a point to say that the relationship between them has been good, and that in this session, especially, that they've worked together on issues, and they accomplished a lot in the session. So if you veto, so say you veto, this brings me back to it. You veto that legislation, okay? And it's really tough, that legislation. That's as a political, as a matter of politics.
Both reasonings right now are equally the same. And that's a very difficult situation for him to be in, because common sense says it has to change. But then you've got a lot of people backing you up for re-election in that state related to this industry as well. Not an easy situation to be in.
If you veto the bill,
just lets it expire.
That to me is the most logical. So this, by the way, is
why does that mean logic? Because if he lets it expire, it goes into law. But
he didn't touch it. He doesn't own the problem. He didn't own the problem, and he didn't create the problem.
Yeah, it's like a store. You break it. You touch it.
And to be completely honest, one of the things that I did hear at Benzinga was that the re-rating of the Farm Bill and the changing of the definition around hemp is very real this time around, and that this is 3 years of work that is being put forth that Andy Harris is pushing right now. And there's a very, very above average chance that the Farm Bill does get closed as it relates to hemp. And if that does happen, which the markup was today, and I didn't hear anybody really objecting with any strong language to the Farm Bill addressing hemp and changing the definition, then SB3 doesn't matter, because hemp, as it relates to the intoxicating products, will become illegal federally overnight with the Farm Bill definition changing. And this is all just
Brian Dombrowski, good to see you. Basically made a comment, but last sentence, right? Abbott's about to make a statement. Is that true, Brian? Or is that just a prediction, or you're speculating? But if there is some truth to that,
it could be true, right? I think that there's a lot of, nobody knows exactly what is going to happen. And I think that comments that have been made by the governor lead to the idea that it hasn't been decided yet, right? So could there be a veto? Yes. Could he not sign the bill? Yes. Could he sign the bill? Yes. So what good is that in terms of the prediction or the odds, right? I'm just talking about what I think the political calculus is on that, right? Because look, you veto. So say you veto the bill. Are they going to go in a special session over it? And then if they go in a special session, is it going to be the language that previously was agreed to before the bill was amended again to where it was, which folks were still, not happy with necessarily where that language was, right? So where do you, what happens at that point?
Yeah. Well, some interesting comments here. Just Chad writes, be a bold choice to ignore that mountain of letters completely. I hear you. And
like I'm saying, none of this matters if the Farm Bill changes the definition of hemp.
Yeah, you're right.
And then Abbott's saved because his inaction is moot.
Yeah.
Look at some of the other issues that where Governor Abbott has been on some of these things, right? Look at where he's been on same-sex marriages. Look at where he's been on, right? You're not that he is a very conservative governor, right? Who hasn't necessarily bent to popular opinion on stuff.
Yeah.
Okay. So I just the thing is we don't know. We don't know. It could go either direction. Also, you have a farm bill markup today. What happens when what happens when federal government, you start seeing federal government moving a certain direction?
I hear you.
Right. So it's I think it's another wild card.
Well, I'd be curious to see, when you saw Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick last week or 2 weeks ago make that comment that was completely misinformed. If, who knows, but rumor has it they don't get along, him and Abbott, but you've said, they've worked actually closely on a number of things recently that says the complete opposite. But you wonder if Abbott has those same kind of views about some of the stuff that Lieutenant Patrick actually mentioned during that press conference. But either way you look at it, it was completely misinformed on some of the stuff he was outlining.
It was we've said this before, that press conference was stunning.
It was stunning to give you a real complexion as to where we are in so many levels pertaining to cannabis and hemp right now in 2025. Complete disconnection.
It personifies all of the BS that we have to deal with. I mean, the fact of the matter is 95% of the people that we are leaning on to regulate this industry don't fundamentally understand it in the least bit.
Need to hire Gretchen Gailey as a field reporter, because we need media there asking questions that understand the space. Because unless you get somebody pushing back on questions, the mass audience is just going to believe what they see, right? Anything else you guys want to touch on? I think, Anthony, you want to touch on North Carolina as well. I keep hearing some positive things about that. But is that
both governors of the Carolinas, North and South, are both starting to get vocal about implementing sensible medical marijuana infrastructure within their states, which would be big.
The tide's turned. I think that also there's also what they're doing is they're evaluating what's currently going on in state too. So you're seeing, even in North Carolina, they understand that there's a lot of kind of synthetic THC derivative products that are around or being produced in the market. And they're starting to weigh what a solution might be. Irrespective of kind of where folks believe or think what's going on in Texas, there is something to this. I don't think it's like coincidence per se from thematics that talking about an expansion of a medical program, right? Because people are comfortable with medical marijuana.
Yeah.
Right. That is done. You poll, it's 90%. Everyone's like, all right, medical marijuana is where we have to be. So you're getting in states that don't really permit it, which are far and few between at this point. Okay. You're getting a conversation going and they're starting to get educated on that issue. And a lot of us really, that's what brought us into this industry. I was brought into this as a medical marijuana advocate. It's the thing that, I've been passionate about for a number of years. And it's really exciting to see, the tide turn on that discussion.
Yeah. What do you think, when we look about the 11th hour with Texas and a new state like North Carolina, what do you think is your role on pushing that narrative forward in both states? Like, what role are you playing in right now with some of the positive momentum that is building in North Carolina?
I think medical marijuana, what we've argued in a number of different states to get implementation of medical marijuana is that marijuana is medicine. We talk about how it's helped patients, the record of delivery in a number of different states. I think those arguments now people are really understanding. And I think there's also now going forward a public health and safety argument that has to be made, especially around the industry, because public health and safety, consumer protection are going to be fundamental in order to get where we need to go from a legalization standpoint and a regulation standpoint. So those are things that we're spending more time on in states like that. And it's at the forefront of those discussions.
Michael, maybe walk us through just an example when you see something like this develop. How do you first approach this? Who do you speak to? So that way people kind of get a better understanding.
Yeah. So the thing that we also do is we select targets. So we look at things that could be happening internally. We look at states. We have a discussion internally about places that we feel could make a difference in terms of where we weigh in, positive difference.
Yeah.
For where we weigh in, meaningful difference for where it is that we weigh in. And we say, okay, well, these are the X amount of states right now that we think we should be helping, playing.
Targeting.
Yeah. And then I think the other thing is like, how do we get involved? All right. Are we directly on the ground in that, right? Are we helping out groups that are on the ground pushing for legalization? Okay. Do we, how established is a movement down there? Can we help cultivate a movement to do it too? Because it's like you come into a state, it's like, all right, where are the doctors that support this? Where are the advocates that support this, right? And sometimes all it does is it creates, you have to build the infrastructure around them to be able to make the argument and then give them the tools and materials that they need to be able to advocate. And sometimes they need that. And that has been the role. All right. It is to aid people. If we have to put folks on the ground, we'll put folks on the ground on that too, which we do as well.
Yeah.
And that's how we move the conversation forward. It's really an intensive effort.
10 years or so now you've had this company, correct?
This association is going into our 11th year.
11th year. Looking back, what was the turning point? When you look at all the work that you've done, was there one thing that stood out to you more so than ever that really said, wow, we did a lot of good work here and it was a changing point for a specific state? Like, is there anything that comes to mind?
I mean, 10 years ago, we worked on Pennsylvania medical marijuana.
Yeah.
Right. Which was a big turning point in the medical marijuana movement. And then also in the legalization movement. We worked in Florida, on both amendments that passed. I think that those medical routes and getting legalization were really important. We worked in New Jersey on the legalization campaign. We passed the first federal standard that was published in the NIST handbook on water activity, right? So, and it's the first time something like that happened. It was the first federal recognition that we've had on that. So there've been a lot of key moments that have happened on the way in terms of big wins. And the difference, I think, with what we do out there is folks understand that when we engage, we're doing it in a meaningful and impactful way.
Yeah, I could see that. Well, look, there's been lots of great progress on the state's level pertaining to this industry, and it's a lot of the work. But I want people just to get an understanding of why we continue to do these segments every single week, some of your experience, but then what's the practical approach when we look at Texas, we look at Pennsylvania, and then more importantly, when you're evaluating the next 3 to 4 to 5 markets that could go online and who you're targeting. So all important intel, to say the least. But as usual, love catching up with you every week. And if there's any breaking news this week, any announcements pertaining to PA, we'll reach back out to you and have you right on back on. But all in all, appreciate the update. Okay, sir.
And I do think that so the committee reconvenes in agriculture tonight, I think at around 10:30.
Okay, good to know.
So we do anticipate that there could be a vote either this evening, could be tomorrow. But they broke for the congressional baseball game, which I do not know the score of right now.
Who is the favorite going into that game? Do you know?
I don't. Usually what happens in those games is you have one person who can pitch, and that pretty much ends the game. If you have it's like everything else. If you got good pitching, you can win a congressional baseball game.
Congressional baseball presented by the American Heart Association. And we'll see how that all unfolded.
There are a lot of sponsors that do it.
I'm sure.
I'm sure there are.
Companies.
Yeah, well, we'll reach out to Don maybe and find out if he was at the game. But long story short, let's keep in touch and appreciate the update. Now, like I said, we'll be watching this and paying attention closely to how things develop later tonight. And if there is news pertaining to it, then we'll look to have you back here on Friday, okay?
Looking forward to it.
All right. Thanks, Michael. Appreciate your time.
Thanks, gentlemen.
Yes. There were some people commenting earlier. We reached out. Did we speak to Cresco or Verano this week? Cresco, we did speak to him last week, and they're laying low for a while is what some of the feedback that we've got. So, we'll try to reach out, get some sort of dialogue. but been quiet as far as reaching out and having any conversations with them. We're actually speaking to the Verano people tomorrow off camera, so I don't know what kind of intel we'll learn from there, but just to keep people up to date, we're starting to, or at least trying to reach out to our network and have conversations on specific companies that you all want to know and learn and find out what's next. So anyway, stay tuned for that, but just thought I'd give you guys all just a quick update. And I keep getting this comment, Google the food.
Yep, got to Google the food.
And this just in, Brady Cobb is still not here, but we'll keep you posted. And I lost $100 too, because he was not on the podcast on Monday. So was he even at the conference?
I'm not sure. I don't think so.
I don't think so either. We did see Weldon Angelos towards the end as well, but
saw Weldon, Kim Rivers, Todd Harrison, a bunch of people.
Yeah. So big panel they had yesterday morning.
The guy from Summer House was there that owns that Loverboy brand. I'm pretty sure they're getting into hemp beverages. Everyone's joining the hemp beverage party.
Yep. He was DJing at the after hours party last night too.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah. I didn't realize the kind of following that he has, but it's big.
I was home. Yeah, my wife watches that show. That's why I saw him walking through the crowd, and I was like, I know who that is.
What's the network? Is it Bravo?
I'm not sure.
Anyway. All right. Back here Friday morning. And just to give you all a quick heads up, Raj Grover, CEO of High Tide, is going to be joining me. I wish Anthony was coming, but he can't. I realize, young family, but I'm going to be in Berlin a week from tomorrow. I'm going to do some pre-records in the morning, because by the time I get going with interviews, it's going to be like, say, 10 a.m. Berlin time, which is 4 a.m. our time. But I look to go live later in the day with Raj Grover from Mary Jane Berlin, Raj Grover from High Tide. I'll keep all of you updated throughout the week as to some of the guests that we're having on, but there's some representatives from Village Farms that are going to be there. So some interesting conversations that will take place. That'll be next Thursday, all courtesy of Big Mike and Advanced Nutrients that are basically paying the way for us to head over to Berlin to have a kick-ass podcast studio. So if Big Mike and the crew at Advanced Nutrients is watching now, a big thank you and a thumbs up for getting us over there, because I love doing on-location content. And don't worry, we got all the technical issues figured out towards the end of the day on Monday, and things will go real smooth next week. So in the meantime, keep you guys all updated too. We got some new orders for swag in. So I know some of you reached out pertaining to that as well. And if you want to get a full recap of some of the takeaways that we had at Benzinga this week, make sure to scan that QR code to become a daily baked-in newsletter subscriber, which is delivered to your inbox tomorrow morning, 8 a.m. Eastern time, and every morning, weekdays, Monday through Friday at 8 a.m. Eastern time. Good seeing you, sir. And no hockey game tonight, but
tomorrow.
Wow, what a kick-ass beating.
It'll be an ass beating again tomorrow. Then we'll win in 6.
Oh, you were hilarious. We're at this rooftop party or little industry event, and I was trying to have a conversation with some people, and you were smacking me on the back like it seemed like every 2 minutes. You're like 2, 3, 4, and next thing you know, it was 6-1. That was a spanking.
Yep.
All right, sir. Good seeing you, and I'll see you back here, all of you, Friday, 11 a.m. Thanks everyone for checking in here today. Hey everyone, we just eclipsed 50,000 subscribers on our YouTube channel. We want to continue to grow this community. So if you haven't done so, make sure to subscribe now. We'd appreciate it very much here at the TDR Traded Black podcast. As usual, let's keep the conversation going. So leave your comments below and we'll get back to you with any feedback that you want to learn more of. In the meantime, enjoy the rest of your day and we'll see you next time on our latest Traded Black podcast.